In faith, the people rushed over, led by the warriors. Instead of failing like the previous generation, they chose to write a new chapter. God has your story, but you are responsible to write it. And I love this, that Israel now isn't choosing faithlessness, they choose faithfulness. The priests go to the middle of the Jordan, it stops 18 miles up, land hard as a rock. The people don't walk over single file, they walk over in one big rush. 1.5 million people cross over the Jordan River as the priests are holding the ark. They pass by the ark. And right before the people go over, 12 men, the leaders from the tribes, take rocks from the Jordan River. And it's the idea that, imagine this, you are Israel, and you're on the east side of the Jordan, and the Jordan's at flood stage. There's no way you're going to get across. You've got old people, you've got infants, you've got nursing mothers, you've got herds of animals, you've got baby animals. How in the world are you going to get across Jordan? It seems that God has brought us to an impossible place. Yet now, God, you got some massive guns carrying that rock. I just want you to know that.
Wait till next year.
The orchard has amazing men. Who knew you were so strong? But at the end of the day, watch what happens. Ready? A miracle happens. They're like, I can't believe it. Nursing mothers and elderly ladies can walk across because they're walking on hard ground. I can lead my cattle across. I can lead donkeys across, chickens across. We don't have to barge them across, waiting for the water level to go down. God has done a miracle. And here's the point. You know why they pulled these rocks out? It's because when they stacked them up, those rocks that used to be underwater for the rest of their lives showed testimony to the faithfulness of God when people want to be involved in God's story rather than their own story. You want to know when these rocks don't come out of the Jordan? Is when they stand on the other side and go, that's too hard. Or I'm scared. But when God opens a door, you have to be faithful to walk through it. Listen to me, you're going to waste your life if you keep screwing around on your own timetable. You got one life, and my hope for you as your pastor is that you don't waste your life. And the only way for you to not waste your life is to get on board with God's story. Because you're going to see God do miracles in your family, at school, in your own heart. There's going to be a miracle that God goes, it's time to start following God. Amen. Come back to my story, because it's the only story that matters. And these rocks are going to have testimony in your own life about the faithfulness of God. You'll be able to look back on your life if you follow God's story and go, look at the awesome part that God did in my life. I used to be a heroin addict. God cleaned me up. I was cheating on my wife, and all of a sudden, God got me back into reality of his story. I repented and came back to him. I was cheating on my husband, and man, I didn't realize as a woman how far I had gotten off of God's will. That's the testimony to the movement of God in the impossible. Lastly, we are to promote God's story. We are to pursue God's story. We are to participate in God's story. You have a choice. You don't have to. Even if you're listening to me right now online or in this room, I know some of you are thinking, I'm not really interested in doing that. Okay. Nobody's forcing you, but understand this. What are you going to have to show for at the end of your life when some pastor like me does your funeral? And all people can say about you is, he made some money. She was a good mom. Whatever. At the end of the day, an hour after they put you in the ground, literally almost no one cares. But you know what will matter? Is when people give testimony to the faithfulness that you had to chase God. That's what matters at funerals, and I've done a ton of them. You know, the saddest kind of funerals are when people have to make up stuff. He was a good friend. Do you even know who he is? No, I'm just reading this paper. You know what the best funerals is when people go, that woman chased God. She was a faithful wife. She ran her company well. I worked for her. She was incredible. She was an amazing woman of God. Not perfect, but she chased Jesus. Nobody has to make up stories. Nobody has to tell lies. Nobody has to go, oh, I think he's floating over us with the butterflies. People go, I know exactly what kind of life he led or she led. It was chasing God. And now the end of their story continues on. Why? Because I saw their faithfulness and I want to emulate that in my own life. Number 3, we are to promote God's story. You know why the rocks were brought out of the Jordan? To promote the faithfulness of God. To stand witness about the fact that if you follow God, God will get your back. When the people reached the other shore, God released the water, and it flowed again into the Dead Sea. The purpose of the 12 stones was to testify to future Israelites of God's goodness and power. Believers are to recall and relate their stories to help others see God's story. Get ready, parents, or young 20-somethings that are going to have puppies in a few years. The greatest enemy of future faithfulness is forgetfulness. Ready? The greatest enemy of future faithfulness of your kids or grandkids is forgetfulness. You know how you battle forgetfulness? Is repeated story. You know why? You know why you even remember some of the stories your mom told you when you were 3 years old, like books they read? The places you'll go, green eggs and ham, blah, blah, blah. You know why you haven't read those books in 50 years, but you still remember those books? Is because you're built for story. And somebody shared a story with you, and you remember it to this day. You know how you keep your kids from straying away from God? Is you continually tell them about how awesome God has been in your life. You know what? Me and your dad, we almost got divorced. But God was faithful to our marriage. You know what? Before I met your dad, I was sleeping around. I felt like trash. It was garbage. I was lonely, and I didn't have any self-value. But God gave me value as a woman of God now. And daughter, I don't want you to go down that same road. God's been faithful to me. Don't do that. My company was going in the toilet, and God resurrected my company out of literal death. And I just want to give glory to God for what he's done in my life, in my family's life, in my company's life. Those are the stories that say, here's where God met me, here's the miracle that God did to bring me to this point. Now I retell that story so you know that you can trust God too.